Okay, do you guys feel the awkwardness of when you change the word of worship up? I'm already up for the lesson. Isn't this weird? This is weird, I know. But trust me, there's a point to it, more or less. Okay, here's something you may not know about me. Do I get that on there? Okay, here's something you may not know about me. I secretively really love weddings. I'm kind of a nerd. I don't know if that's a nerd or romantic. I'm not sure which one. But on my computer, I actually have a folder where if I run across really creative wedding pictures, I save that picture and I throw it in that file. And I know that's kind of odd, but I like weddings a lot. And I think there's a couple of reasons why I like weddings. Now, this is going to sound really cryptic, but my third favorite wedding ever. Okay, my third favorite wedding ever was my daughter's wedding, okay? That's my third favorite. I'll let you figure out the other ones, all right? But here's me and my daughter doing the father-daughter dance. I told you guys when we got back from the wedding, my brother, I love how he described that wedding. He said, Rob, I have 3 words to describe this wedding. Joy, joy, joy. And as you just look at the pictures of us, look at me, woohoo, man! I got my vest on, and man, me and Tammy, we were dancing and cutting a rug. That's our son next to us. He's laughing really hard, watching me try to dance. And if you are ever fortunate enough for me to be at a wedding that you're at, and it's a good wedding, it's a fun wedding, you may even, this is rare, but you may even get to see me break dance. I'm just saying, okay? That's not me in the fetal position. That's me doing a backspin, all right? I learned that in junior high in Oklahoma, okay? So I love weddings, and I know that God and that Jesus loves weddings also. Think about it. Did you know the book of the Bible, Genesis, starts off with a wedding? It starts off with God taking Adam, and he takes the rib out of Adam, and then he makes Eve, and he brings Eve to her husband. And there's this wedding ceremony. And the book ends with the wedding. You go and in Genesis, there's a wedding, and at the very end, there's a wedding, where we're told there's going to be the wedding of the Lamb. Now, if you haven't grown up in the church, that sounds really weird, but I promise it's not that odd, okay? It starts with the wedding. It ends with the wedding. What was Jesus' first, where did he do his first miracle? Was that what? At a wedding, okay? Turn water into wine. Water into grape juice, okay? And so it starts that way. And so getting ready for this, I jumped online and I was trying to see if I could find some interesting proposals, wedding proposals, okay? And so this is in Japan. A gentleman took his girlfriend he said, I want to take you to this beautiful restaurant. And they walked into the restaurant and it's completely empty. And he says, oh, hold on, I have to take a phone call. I'll be back in a minute. And he leaves her in this empty restaurant. Now, the cool thing is this restaurant was next to this big window that overlooked this huge skyscraper. And as she looked over the skyscraper, all the lights were off in the building except for a couple of floors, and she saw all these people with sticky notes inside that room. And what it was, she didn't know this, but all of her friends, all of his friends, all their coworkers were inside those rooms with sticky notes, and they were spelling something out with the sticky notes. And what it ended up saying was, Anyan, will you marry me? And so when she realized that was for her, Anyan was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. No way. And he came in with flowers and proposed to her in that room. And they sat down. You can kind of see there in the corner. They're sitting down having a meal while their friends are all next door and the lights are flashing and they're over there celebrating and partying that they got engaged. Isn't that creative? Now here's a couple that you probably can't tell, they were really into piercings and tattoos. She's a tattoo artist, and they started dating, and they really had a passion for tattoos, and he said, someday I want you to give me a tattoo. And they dated for a long time, and they got really serious, and he said, hey, I'm going to come in today, and I want you to give me a tattoo. And she said, okay, great. And he came in and sat down, and she goes, where do you want the tattoo? And he said, I want to hear my leg. And as he pulled his pant leg up, he had on his pant leg, will you marry me, yes or no? And the video was so cute. I wish I could edit the video well enough that it's kind of fun to see this really tough-looking tattoo artist just going, crying, trying to put an X on yes, okay? And so what a creative way to propose to somebody, all right? This couple's from Florida, and they're beach bums, and they love the beach, and they every day in the morning, they try to take a walk down a certain pier area that's one of their favorite places to walk. And one day, as they were walking down, he just kind of pointed off to the side and said, oh, look over there in the sand. And what he had done is he had gone out the night before, and he had written out in the sand, doing sand art, will you marry me? And she ran down there, down the bottom hand corner, you can see she wrote yes. And later on that year, they got married in that exact same spot. Isn't that beautiful when somebody puts some thought and some effort into proposing? Isn't that an awesome thing? Well, I don't have time to tell you the whole story, but I have some really great news that David and Alexandra got engaged last night. And it was a great story. I'll give the short version of it, but Marley was so cute. She saw it happen. The Alexandra she was going to have to head back home, and she was trying to decide if she was going to head back home and then maybe later come back to the States and you guys get engaged. And last night they had a little Halloween party, and she said, David, I want to show you this slideshow. And at the end of the slideshow, it just said, I've loved my time with you, and I'm not going home. And David didn't know he was going to see that. What David had in his pocket, though, was a ring to propose. He was thinking he was going to be at the end of the night, be like, oh, I'm going to make a big thing, I'm proposing. And it was beautiful, perfect timing as that came up on the video, and everybody at the party is like, yeah, that's awesome. And all of a sudden, David drops to a knee and proposes. It was beautiful. It was great. Now, she was dressed like a zombie bride, and he was dressed like a zombie groom at the time. That's kind of odd, but that's nothing. We'll worry about that later. When you show your kids someday the pictures, they'll be like, whoa, that was weird. But it was this beautiful thing. And someday, maybe, I might tell you the long story of me and Tammy when I got engaged to Tammy. I won't tell you the story right now. I'll save it for later. But I do want you to know that what happened is there came a point where when I was very romantic, and when I said, will you marry me, her response was, no way. So that's a story for later, though, okay? It worked out sooner. It finally worked out. It took a while, though. It took some, okay? And so the reason I'm telling you all these stories is because we are focusing today on the Lord's Supper. I want you guys to know, man, I feel like every Sunday the Lord's Supper is the most important thing we do. It's not the worship. It's not the sermon. It's not people talking in between. Remembering what Christ did for us and how much He loves us. That's the most important thing every Sunday morning. Amen. Okay, so here's what I want to explain to you guys. I want to talk to you guys about how in Jesus' day, how a young man would propose to a young woman with Jewish heritage. Now, as I tell you about this, I want for you to connect the dots. If you guys are paying attention, teens, you guys can do this. Man, look at the teen section. There's like 20 kids in like 5 chairs. This is awesome, okay? As I want you guys to try to connect the dots of what I'm going to tell you with what Jesus tells us throughout Scripture, okay? And so, to make it sound more biblical, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. So here are the things that would happen for a young man if he wanted to marry a young woman in Old Testament times, okay? Well, if they were Jewish, he would go to his father and he would say, this is the woman I want to marry, and they would talk it out, and the parents would talk and things like that, and there would finally come a day where there would be an agreement that there would be an amount paid so that those two could get married. I don't know who paid who or how it worked. I'm pretty sure that this sounds terrible. I think the father paid for the daughter to get engaged, and I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to get in trouble. That sounds sexist, but okay. And I'm assuming that you could hear that and go, how sexist? Well, guess what? It depends on how much you got paid for. If you got paid a whole lot, you wouldn't be offended at all. You'd be like, oh, that's flattering. Okay. So a cost would be agreed upon for the dowry, for them to become engaged. And once that was paid, they would have a family meal together. In the Old Testament, especially in Jewish tradition, to have a meal with somebody, that was deep. That was important. That was saying, you and I, we are at peace with one another. We have shalom with one another. They would come together and they would have a meal. Now, during the meal, there would come a certain point during the meal where a cup of wine would be offered from the groomsman from the groom-to-be to the bride-to-be. Just real quick, I love this. I've had this cup for several years. Cam and I love this cup. Our entire youth group at Lakewood has taken communion from this cup. Our entire church for several months took communion from this cup. This was the cup that at my daughter's wedding, they took communion during my daughter's wedding, and they had wine from Galilee that they took out of this cup. And so I love this cup. You can't have this cup, okay? And so what would happen is the groom would get up, and he would pour a cup of wine, and he would take that wine and he would walk over to the young woman that he wanted to get engaged to, and he would hold it out to her. And if she took the cup and drank it, that was her saying yes. instead of getting down on a knee and offering a ring, he would offer a cup. And as she took the cup and she drank it, the next thing that would happen is that the groom-to-be would go back home with his father. The father is there with them, and she would take the cup, and everybody would go, Mazel Tov, and they would be excited, and they would celebrate, but then the party would calm down, and the father and son would go back to the father's house. And while they're at the father's house, the son would start preparing a room for his future bride. And it depended on, sometimes maybe it would take months, maybe it would take over a year. I guarantee you that groom-to-be worked harder than he had ever worked in his entire life on getting that house, and getting that room attached to the house. And who knows, maybe the mother-in-law or the father and the mother were kind of like, I don't know, I think we should be bigger. Maybe she would like this kind of curtains. And man, the groom just wants to get that thing done. He wants to go get his wife. But once the room was complete, and they looked at it and it was just perfect, he would go to get his bride. Now, because there wasn't a set time, the time for the wedding was unknown. So think about that for a minute. Think about the bride-to-be. She took that cup, she drank that cup, and this man that she's fallen in love with, he went away, and she doesn't know when he's coming back. And so she gets all of her friends together, and they get the wedding dress ready. And the wedding dress, I guarantee you, is hanging in her room. And every morning she gets up immediately and puts on her makeup or pinches her cheeks and does her hair as quick as she can. And she probably takes that wedding dress and makes sure it looks nice and that nothing got on it. And she is just waiting to hear the wedding procession come into town. When she hears the wedding procession coming into town, she will get dressed and she'll gather her friends around her, and they'll get the flowers that they've talked about, and they're going to go out to meet the groom-to-be. The bride was looking forward to this, and so she was always making sure she was ready for when the groom would come back to get her. And when the groom showed up, oh my goodness, the wedding party would start. Tammy and I, we went to, the school we went to was pretty conservative, and every wedding we went to, of all of our friends, you just tried to stay awake, okay? It wasn't exciting. It typically wasn't fun. There was nothing thrilling. Tammy and I, we had a beautiful wedding, but it was kind of a bummer. We got to the very end, and you may now kiss the bride, and we kissed the bride, and we turned, and they said, want to introduce Rob and Tammy Duncan, and there was supposed to be music that played so we could walk out, and somebody had tripped over the cord and unplugged the record player, or the tape player. We're not that old. Okay, the cassette deck. And so we're standing there, and they say, Mr. and Mrs. Duncan. Complete silence. And we're just standing there. Let's go. We walk out to complete silence, okay? That is not what a Jewish wedding is like. A Jewish wedding doesn't last for an hour or two. A Jewish wedding lasts a minimum of a day or two. And it is a huge celebration. I've shared with you guys before that as a young kid, probably elementary school, maybe junior high, my dad got the movie Fiddler on the Roof. And he made me sit down and watch it. And this movie impacted me because as my dad watched it, I just saw all this joy in my father's face as he watched. This is what Jewish people, this is what they're like. This is what Jesus grew up like. These are the traditions. This is the type of music and what a wedding would be like that Jesus would have gone to when he went to Galilee. And so I'm going to show you 5 minutes of Fiddler on the Roof, okay? Deb's excited, okay? And what I want you to watch and want you to pay attention to is just the joy. I know it's a Broadway show, and probably the dances weren't this choreographed. Choreography, that's not a word, okay? But man, I just want for you to watch and enjoy the joy of what a Jewish wedding is like. So Matt, play that for please. Joy, joy, joy. That is what these weddings were like, filled with joy. And so, those who have spiritual ears, let them hear. I invited Tammy to help us connect the dots, if you will. So let's kind of go through these 5 things one more time and see if you guys can put together what Jesus is doing during the Lord's Supper. So the first thing is a cost would be agreed upon. And at first Peter is writing to the church and he's letting them know how valuable they are and how much it cost for them to be bought.
For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect.
The second thing, a family would come together for a meal. When you sat down together at a meal, it was saying that we have peace with one another. We are in unity with one another. And in Luke 22, it says that Jesus, as he prepared the Lord's Supper, he talked to his disciples about how excited he was.
And he said to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you.
A cup was offered. And it was held out to the bride-to-be. Now, even this morning, you guys have probably noticed that just changing up the order of worship a little bit kind of feels weird to us. It feels awkward. We know how things flow. We got to know how it goes. Well, there was a flow and there was kind of an order of worship to the way you did the Passover meal. That's what Jesus was having with his disciples. And Jesus, when he held out this cup, it was changing up the order of worship. It was changing up the way they always did it. And this grabbed the attention of the disciples. And so as he held that cup out, we read in Matthew 26 what he said about that cup.
Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom.
That word that he's using, this is my covenant, this is marriage language. This is wedding language. We've talked about before, if you ever heard somebody say, dearly beloved, we are gathered here. Here in the United States, we immediately know, oh, this is a wedding ceremony. When he holds that cup out and he says, this is my covenant, that grabbed their attention because he's using wedding language. So once the girl took the cup and drank of it, the groom would go back home with his father. And in Luke 13, Jesus was talking to his disciples about how he wasn't going to stay with them forever when he said this.
My children, I will be with you only just a little longer. Where I am going, you cannot come. Simon Peter asked, Lord, where are you going? Jesus replied, where I am going, you cannot follow now, but you will follow later.
Once the groom returned back home, he began to prepare a room for his bride. And we didn't know how long it was going to take to get that room ready. And as he prepared that room, Jesus, in John 14, told his disciples, I am going away, I'm going to die, and I don't want you to be discouraged. So he encouraged them by saying this to them in John 14.
Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms, and if that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am.
As Jesus said these words, they were connecting dots. They were saying, you're going to prepare a room for us? You've held out this cup to us? The next thing that the groom would do is the time was unknown. And so they didn't know when the groom and the father would come back to get the bride. And so we read in Matthew 24 when Jesus was talking about when he and his father would return.
But about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark.
And so the last two things, the bride, she would always be ready. She always made sure she looked her best. She always made sure that wedding dress was ready to put on to run out to see her groom when he would come to get her. In Revelation, we hear about how John saw a vision, and an angel said to John about that wedding at the end of the book. He says this,
"Let us rejoice and exult and give him the glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was granted her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure, for the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints."
And finally, once the groom came into town, when they heard the wedding procession, when they heard the flutes, when they heard the horns, when they heard the partying coming down the street, the party would begin, just like we saw in that movie. And we read that Jesus was talking about what the kingdom of heaven is going to be like someday. And one of the things he decided to say in Matthew 22 is this:
"The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come."
Thank you. To tell them to come. Dear brothers and sisters, this morning, if you've never come to Jesus, if you've never made a decision to say, he's going to be my Lord, I want to be like him, I want to serve him, I pray you don't leave this morning without talking to someone and saying, how do I get to, I want to go to this wedding. How do I get to be part of this wedding? Because he's inviting us all to come. Amen? So, can you connect the dots? Do you see what's going on? Do you see the layers? Do you see the beauty of what Jesus is doing during the Lord's Supper? If you guys would, go ahead and go on back to prepare for that. As we get ready to take the Lord's Supper, we're going to take it and we want to kind of slow down even, if you will. I was doing some research just for the fun of it. Jesus' blood. I love how Peter put that you weren't bought with cheap things, earthly things like gold or silver. No, you were bought with the blood of Christ. There are people out there who they collect wine. Some of them collect it and they never even drink it. That doesn't make any sense, okay? But just for the fun of it, I just went online and I just typed in most expensive bottle of wine to buy. And this one came up and it ends up being over $45,000 to buy that bottle of wine. And the weirdest thing is to see that listed there, that bottle of wine, and then right next to $45,000, a purchase button. I'm just like, that seems, can you just click on that and you spent $45,000? That's insane. But I remember I got paid one time to get to go to a wine tasting thing, and I didn't want to look uncivilized, so of course I did what you guys would do. I got on YouTube in parking lot before I went to this thing, and I wanted to look civilized. And it talked about how whenever you get a glass of wine that you want to hold it down here, because if you hold it up here, it warms up the wine. And you want to turn it sideways and let the wine run down so you can look at the legs, and you want to smell it and how to drink it. And one of the things they talk about to truly enjoy a glass of wine is when you drink it, you let it settle. You don't drink it and just throw it down. You let it just sit there for a minute. And so as we take the Lord's Supper here in a minute, if you want to take the cup and you just want to hold that for a while, you can do that. Let's not rush through this. Let's not let timing and tradition force us to move too quickly. Some of the wedding pictures I've run across recently that I got really excited about. From Isaiah 62. "For as a young man marries a young woman, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you." Oh, men, do you remember the day you got up and you got dressed and you were standing there at the aisle and you were waiting for your bride to walk in? Do you remember the 1,000 emotions you were going through? And man, when I saw Tammy, I wanted to run down that aisle and skip all that stuff and just do the kiss, man. This is taking too long. I want to see my wife. I want to see my bride. That's how your God feels about you. Jesus is standing at the door just saying, "Father, is it time yet? Can I go get my bride? I'm so ready. I broke the bread and I had the wine with the disciples, and I said I wouldn't have the wine again until the day I went to get them. Is it time yet? Can I go get them? I want to go get my bride. He can't wait for that moment. Some of the pictures I've been running across, there's this new thing in weddings that I love. I think it's beautiful. And it's where the bride and the groom, they don't let them see each other, but they bring them to a corner or they bring them to a door, and they have them stand on opposite sides and just hold hands. Can you imagine the excitement? Can you imagine the anticipation of, oh, I want to spend the rest of my life with you? And I hope and I pray that every time that we take the bread, every time we share the cup, I hope and I pray that you feel Jesus' hand just reaching around the corner, holding your hand, saying, it won't be long. The day's going to come where my Father tells me, go get your bride. And so one thing I love about these pictures is all these different emotions. Some are laughing, some are super serious. This guy looks like he's singing. Woo, that looks cool. This couple looks like they're praying. There's all these emotions that they're going through. And so we purposely have set aside the next 15 minutes as we take the Lord's Supper and we sing songs, to sing slow songs, to sing happy songs, to sing songs so that you can look forward to when that day comes. And as you take the cup today, I want you to realize Jesus is saying to you, will you enter into a covenant with me? Will you love me until the day you die? Because I love you so much, I died for you. I want for you to be my bride. I want to take care of you. I've gone to prepare a room for you, and there's a day that I'm going to come back for you, and he's holding out that cup to you saying, will you be mine? And so as we take the Lord's Supper this morning, just slow down and say, I do. Father, thank you for this beautiful imagery. Thank you for these layers that you've laid out for us in celebrating and remembering you. That you have paid the price, that you are preparing a room, that there's a day that you're going to come back, that you have told us, oh, dear bride, be ready for when you hear the wedding procession coming. And Father, we can't wait for that day that we get to join into that Jewish type celebration because of what you've done for us and how you've rescued us. We love you, Lord, and we ask these things in your Son's name. And the church says, let's take some time just to get lost in the Lord's Supper.